Great pleasure right now to welcome to our show a woman that has written a book called Cheap, The High Cost of Discount Culture, just out in paperback. We're joined by Ellen Ruppel Shell today by telephone. Ellen, thanks for being with us. How are you today?
I'm pretty good. I think you're really hot.
We are hot. Well, not as hot as they are up in New York, I understand. So
good. Good. Well, you're more used to it than we are.
Are you out in the Midwest, or?
I'm not. I'm in New England.
Oh, New England. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I am.
And it's unusually warm even for up there, I guess.
Oh, it sure is. It sure is. And we're not so used to it. We're used to the cold, but not to this heat.
Well, your Red Sox are down here in Tampa Bay this week, and our baseball team is beating yours.
You know, what can I say? Win some, lose some, right?
That's it. Well, I had a chance to read through the book, Ellen, and was fascinated by it. I've always kind of been a junior economist, I guess, kind of following it. My dad was a banker for many years, and I think the thesis of the book were everybody is looking for a bargain, but that is now having some detrimental consequences, isn't it, to our economy, right?
Yeah, it certainly is. I think many of us don't think about that as we're rushing after those July 4th deals, and there's sales year-round now, so there's probably no time we go to the store we can't get discounts.
As we're talking, Ellen, they are making the Walmart down here into a super Walmart, and we're seeing more of those, not to pick on Walmart, but we're seeing more of those types of stores cropping up around, which are putting the smaller mom-and-pop businesses out of business, and that's not good for the economy either, is it?
Right. I think a lot of us think, Walmart or these large supercenters are a choice that people have, and of course it is a choice, but what they forget sometimes is their other choices are being taken away. So whether they work in a mom-and-pop store, own a mom-and-pop store, or used to shop at the mom-and-pop store or other smaller stores, that choice is being removed from the table, right? So we're left with kind of a bifurcated system. We have, very, very, expensive luxury stores for the wealthy elite, and then we have, the discounters for everybody else, for 90% of Americans, and that's taken away a lot of opportunity from us and from our kids.
Yeah, kind of, if you could, maybe just in a capsule form, explain. As more and more of these discount stores are becoming the predominant places people shop, it eventually drives down wages, doesn't it?
Right. It's not just discount stores, it's discounting of all kinds that have caused, the suppliers to have to push down wages and benefits for their workers, outsource their work. As you know, much manufacturing now is no longer done in the United States. For most consumer goods, very, very little is done in the U.S. So it's a chasing around the globe of the very, race to the bottom, looking for the cheapest possible workers, cheapest possible materials to provide American consumers with the lowest possible prices. So, of course, this has come back to bite us, and in cheap, the high cost of discount culture, I talk about that kind of unfortunate cycle whereby, sure, great, we can get cheap T-shirts, we can get cheap CD players, but we oftentimes don't get quality CD players, and they break every year, certainly in my experience. But we also don't have the opportunity to manufacture those things in the U.S. Because we can't compete with, our own workers can't compete with those very, very low-wage workers. But it's not only the workers, it's up and down the supply chain that has, really squeezed out the wages and benefits for workers of all kinds, whether they're working in accounting or they're working in, anywhere up and down the supply chain. There's pressure to keep those wages and benefits low for everyone except for the folks right at the top. And they're the ones who've really benefited the most by this cheap culture.
Oh. Yeah, as you talk about in the book, in the early part of the 1900s through, I guess, maybe the 70s or 80s, the predominant manufacturing of most of these products was done in the United States, wasn't it? Except for some, maybe electronics then went to Japan and then came in that way. But since we've a lot of companies have moved those manufacturing factories overseas to other countries, then this particular culture you talk about in the book is kind of invaded into our economy, right?
Well, sure. We didn't even have something called a container ship until around the 1950s. We didn't have this large importation of goods. In fact, imported goods were kind of expensive goods in those days. So with some exceptions, yes, you're right about Japan in the 50s and 60s. But by and large, we produce most of what we needed in terms of consumer goods here in the U.S. Of course, all that's been squeezed out thanks to technology-powered globalization. We no longer have to produce things in the U.S. And I'm not advocating that everything be produced in the U.S. What I'm advocating is kind of a leveling of the playing field so that we treat workers anywhere in the world fairly, put them on, kind of the way we would expect ourselves to be treated, and then let the prices fall where they may, because that will elevate wages and benefits for us here in the U.S. significantly and allow us to make our own choices about where we spend our money. Fewer of us will be forced to shop at discount stores, which is really not a freedom of choice. I mean, this is where many people are forced to shop because they have no alternative. And many of them, talking about this book around the country, I can tell you that a lot of working people are really sick of having that choice taken away from them.
You mentioned the word price. I enjoyed a couple of chapters you wrote on the psychology of pricing. I think people are probably getting a little more savvy now when you see stores marking down prices. You talked about, I guess, an iPod when it came out. Now you wait a couple of months, it's going to go down in price. I think people are a little more wary of those practices, but it still is fascinating, isn't it, how pricing works?
Pricing is so clever, I can't even begin to tell you. I mean, there are legions of PhDs who set prices, set markdowns. There's no way for the average consumer, anyone, myself certainly included, to kind of psych this out. How do they do this? How do they draw us in? We're kind of aware of all the tricks, but they still capture us. And that's the word they use. They want to capture us, capture consumers, capture our dollars, and they do it in such a way that it's very, very hard for us to resist. So basically, the book is an effort to educate people about these things, and myself, by the way. I mean, I didn't know this before I did this book. To arm us against this and help us make wiser buying decisions that are not only, better for our economy, better for our kids, better for our future, but, better for our pocketbook. Will actually save us money now.
Well, what's your feeling as far as what will turn this around in the economy? Nothing wrong with discounts, and we all want that, and we all want good value for our money, but as we said before, a lot of manufacturing is not here anymore. Well, what's the answer? Have you found anybody to tell you
Sure.
that?
Well, no, it's not a matter of, it's what you said before is value for our money. And I think, in particular, some younger people are getting the idea of value. What's value? Cheap is not necessarily value. I mean, as your grandparents would tell you, it's cheap. I mean, there's an old expression, I'm too poor to be cheap. Okay? Okay. Because, when you buy cheap stuff, you have to replace it. It doesn't do the job that you want it to do. You have to rebuy it, or you have to buy something else, or you double buy. So you're really, really not getting value. You're only getting cheap. Okay, so I think people are becoming more aware of that, certainly in the food movement, with young people being very involved in that and really interested in quality and knowing where their food comes from, knowing how it's made, being, what is a true value around food. That's certainly starting to happen. And, if you read the headlines, you notice that, for example, this week in China, people in China are striking. They're on strike. They're starting to push back. The migrant workers, I did go to China for the book. The migrant workers who work for virtually slave wages in China are starting to get second thoughts about it, are starting not to like that. So at a certain point, this is going to have to turn around. The influx of cheap consumer goods is going to stop because we can only play this game for so long. And there's going to be an adjustment, okay, and a focus on true value, what's really valuable to us as consumers, but most importantly as workers and as citizens today.
Well, it's a fascinating topic. It's called Cheap, the High Cost of Discount Culture, just out in paperback. And Ellen, do you have a website you want to direct people to?
If you'd like to, it's called EllenRuppelShell.com. Ellen, RUPPELSHELL.com, and they can find it, and if they have any questions, they can go ahead and email me.
Great. Ellen, it's been a pleasure to talk to you. Hopefully we'll do it again sometime, and thanks for being with us today.
Thank you. Stay cool.